Okay, what we're going to be doing is we're going to be painting a sphere, and just like when we drew it, we're going to, try to get the highlight, the transitional area, transitional tones, the core of the shadow, the reflected light, and then the cast shadow. And the very first thing we want to do is good to kind of just like wet it a little bit. We're not going to paint really wet into wet, but we're going to wet it a little bit and then let it dry. So I just drew a circle. Now I'm just putting water in it, and then while it's drying, so you'll want to make, decide what color. I'll just do a red one. And remember how we've talked about if you're painting something that's red, then in order to make the shadows for it, you need to add the opposite color of red, which is green. And so we're going to be doing, first, just like when we drew it, we're going to do a basic tone of red, just to give it some red tone. Make sure to leave the light area for the highlight. And it's good to have a Q-tip handy and like a cloth or something, so in case if you need to pull out, like if I want to get the light area, I want to keep the light area light, I may have to pull some of the color back out. So I am going to go ahead and just give it a general reddish color. I'm kind of going around where the highlight area is. And remember, this is where the reflected light is. So I'm going to go in with a little more water there, just so that it doesn't get too dark there. And then I'm also going to go in with some water here, so it kind of blends. I don't like that thing there. Alright, so this up here is going to be where my brightest area is. That's where the light hits it first. And then this is going to be the transitional area. This is where I'm going to put the core. I haven't put the core yet. And then down here is going to be the reflected light. And I haven't done the cast shadow yet. The cast shadow is going to be back here. Alright, so now I've got a little bit of a funny area right here. It might be a flaw in the paper. I'm going to try to not worry about that. I'm going to go ahead and make the core of the shadow. And I've added a little tiny bit of green to the red to try to give it that, shaded color. And then I'm going to kind of go around in the shape of the sphere. And I want this to all be, pretty smoothly blended. So I'm going to work on it a little bit. And you can always add some pure color back in. Water is how we get it to blend nicely. Alright. Could go a little bit darker with the core still. Alright, so I've had a chance to let this part dry, and you can see I may want to put another layer on it because the core area could be darker than that, but I think I'm going to go ahead and start on the shadow first, and I'm going to add some water just like we did before. My brush is a little dirty, so it's actually not just water, but that's okay because the shadow is going to be dark. So while I'm adding this area of water, the shadow, the color of a shadow is determined not just by the object that's casting the shadow, but also by the surface that it's being cast upon. So in this case, we're just saying this surface is white. Since it's white, I haven't given it a color. And so, you know, the shadow for white would be really neutral, you know, black, like made from blacks, or complete neutral. And then there's going to be some influence in color from the red. So it's going to be neutral, but it's also going to have a tint, a little, or hint of red in it. So it's definitely not going to be as red as the shadows that are on the object itself. Alright, so now I'm just going to start getting some color in there, and you know, with watercolor I work in layers, so I don't go to my full darkest amount right away. I kind of work up to it because you can always get darker, but it's hard to get lighter once you've gotten dark. So go in there and get this kind of spread out. And I'm noticing a couple things. I'm noticing that the center of the shadow is a little bit lighter than the edges. And I'm also noticing that there's a lighter area right at the very edge, though. It's almost like there's several shadows. There's the dark shadow, the not as dark shadow, and a super light shadow there, so I can paint that if I want to. And then there's another bit of a shadow over there too. So anyway, so I can kind of mimic that. So I'm going to go ahead and start by adding the darker part. Get it right away a little bit darker. It's right here under the object, darker, and then kind of work my way out. And I can see that I'm definitely going to be needing to add some more red into this shaded color, that it's just a little bit too neutral because the color of the ball does affect it. I don't want it to be just a solid shadow, just a solid tone. I want it to have some variation. I think that makes it look more real. And I could do that double shadow thing if I want to. So I think it should have some color bouncing from the ball into it. But not too intense of color. Just gonna have to blend it, like just some red color should be showing up in here. I don't know if you can see that, it's pretty subtle. But just a bit of red kind of showing that the color of the object is influencing the color of the shadow. So I might just let that dry. This paper has some funny spots on it. I think it does that odd spot. That's okay. This one, when it dried, it wasn't as bad. Alright, so I might want to let that dry a little bit and then come back. Actually, no, I'm going to just let that completely dry, and then I'll come back and work on it a little bit more. So I let that dry a little bit, and now what I'm going to do is I want the ball to be darker. I just think it's too light, so it needs more color, and the core definitely needs to be darker. So I'm going to get just some more solid red in here, some more color. And now for the core. So that's really dark, so now I've got to get it blended in a little. Alright, so we're getting close to being done. I'm going to go in and add this dark area that's right near the object. So it's just, I can get a little bit of red in it, and mostly it's black. This is why neatness counts with art, because if you don't really carefully work in certain areas, like right here, the edge of the shape of the ball is completely determined by this line down here, so you got to do it carefully. And yeah, that's much darker right there, and it kind of goes off here like this. And I'm still going to blend it in a little bit though, I think. And you don't have to draw exactly what you see. You can always, you are the artist. Because I mean, there's actually, I have a lot of light sources in here, and ideally I would want more probably to get a really strong light, but I could do this kind of like double shadow thing, because that does look kind of cool. So and I could have a little bit more color in here still. So if I add a bit of water and I think having a little bit of color in the shadow looks nice. And to do that sort of double shadow thing, what's happening is it's kind of darker right here. I'm not sure if you can see that, but there is like a double shadow going on. To me, it looks something like that. And then there's actually even a really light shadow that goes out beyond this one. Take that little thing off of there. There's a really light shadow going out here like this. So I'm going to add it. For some added interest. Alright, so that's basically all there is to it. I'm going to let it dry, and as it's drying, this paper has a couple like abnormalities. You can see these little spots and things are forming as it's drying. So as it dries, I'll just go back in and do any little sort of touch-ups that it needs. A little more blending to make the shadows look, you know, kind of like what I'm seeing. There's a lot of soft blending going on. But that's basically it. Maybe a couple little touch-ups that I can do as this shadow is drying, you know, just to make it look neat. But that's the idea. Like, again, it really does help to have something to look at. You know, that's a big part of being an artist, is being very observant. So there you go. That's how this exercise works. Have fun. Give it a try.